What if everything you've been told about addiction is only half the story? Not that what you've been told is wrong. It's probably not. 12-step programs, inpatient treatment, therapy, plant medicine. All of these approaches are game-changing tools in addiction recovery. They have helped millions of people, including me. And I believe each one of these strategies has their place. But each of these methods has gaps that even the system itself would acknowledge. And if you've experienced addiction and you're in addiction recovery, for long-term well-being, you've got to find a way to fill those gaps. For a lot of people in recovery, people who've done the steps, who show up to their meetings, who've maintained their sobriety, you hit a point where there's a quiet, persistent feeling that something is still missing, that you're ready to move forward out of the addiction model, but you're not sure where to go. If that's you, I want to offer you a reframe, not a replacement for what's already working and what has truly helped you, but a reframe that might help you understand the gaps you still feel and a solution for what to do with them. After spending the last decade in the world of sexual addiction and betrayal trauma, there's one thing I can say confidently. Addiction is not primarily about the substance or behavior you're using. Sex, drugs, alcohol, gambling. It's not about the behavior. It's about what the addiction is doing for you, what unmet need it is meeting. The nervous system doesn't make mistakes. When it reaches for alcohol or pornography or food or gambling, it's reaching for something real. Connection, emotional regulation, relief from mental noise, a sense of worth. The problem isn't that you had those needs. Those are human needs, and we all have those needs. The problem is that you got sucked into a broken solution, a solution that causes more problems than it fixes. When I was living inside this addiction world firsthand, watching someone I loved hurt me and hurt the people we both love, I used to ask or feel so confused. Why can't they just stop? How could they do this to us? What is wrong with them? And the more recovery work I did, the more the answer I found wasn't comfortable. And it wasn't what I expected. In truth, it wasn't that there was anything wrong with them, any more than there was something wrong with me. There was something unaddressed inside them. Something that the behavior was soothing, because I could see my own pain and my own unresolved traumas and the way I was coping with those. Once I could see that for myself, everything about how I thought about addiction and recovery changed. From my memoir, Undone, Unafraid, which shares my journey and my husband's journey through sexual addiction and betrayal trauma, I had spent years asking the wrong question. I kept asking, why won't he stop? As if stopping were simple, as if the behavior existed in a vacuum. It wasn't until I started asking, what is the behavior doing for him, that I could even begin to understand what addiction really was and what healing would actually require. And it wasn't until I asked that same question about myself, about my own patterns, my own defenses, my own bright and shiny armor, that I could begin to heal. A man I'll call Dave came to me after 7 years of sobriety. 7 years. He was doing everything right by the book. And he said, I don't drink, I go to my meetings, I have a sponsor, but I still feel like I'm white knuckling through every day. I don't feel free. I feel like I'm just surviving. And when we started exploring what his addiction had been doing for him, what it was soothing, it became clear pretty quickly. Dave had never learned to sit with emotional discomfort, not as a child, not as an adult. Alcohol had regulated his nervous system for him. When he stopped drinking, the nervous system need didn't go away. He just didn't have the coping tool anymore. So what happens is the drinking addiction switches into a different kind of addiction. Maybe it's an irritability addiction. Maybe it's an ESPN addiction. Maybe it's a pornography addiction. It's just swapping coping strategies rather than learning how to really cope or process emotion in a real and healthy way. So we worked on it through mindfulness. We built the tools. So the problem was not the alcohol. What Dave needed was the actual capacity to feel, process, and move through difficult emotion without escaping it. That's when things changed for him. When I talk about what creates lasting change beyond sobriety, which is a big deal in itself, and I never want to minimize that, but what I want to point to is that sobriety isn't the end. In a lot of ways, it's the beginning of a deeper journey. And what I see as the three things that really hold that deeper journey, mindfulness is at the heart of each one of them. First, surrender. Not giving up, but giving over to a power greater than yourself. Releasing the compulsive grip of control. Learning to let what is be what is and respond from steadiness rather than react from fear. 12-step taught me how to do this, but every contemplative tradition has its own version of this principle. Maybe the Beatles said it best when they said, "Let it be." Surrender is sometimes referred to as the foundation of all spirituality, and there's a reason it keeps showing up. If you don't yet know the power within true surrender, you're missing a crucial piece of the addiction recovery puzzle. Second, understanding impermanence. Impermanence is such a staple of mindfulness. This feeling will pass. This craving is not forever. When we're in the midst of a trigger or tailspin, the nervous system doesn't always believe this. The voice in the head is saying, it's always going to be like this. But the consistent practice of mindfulness can teach it, not by force, but by repeated, gentle experience. And over time, the nervous system starts to regulate in a steadier way. It's different than white knuckling. Third, embodied presence. Learning to be in the body rather than escaping the body. This is the piece most recovery programs barely touch, but it is where so much of the work actually lives. The body is where trauma is stored. And most people struggling in addiction are in that addictive coping strategy because they have internalized a trauma that they don't know how to process. Whether that's a big T trauma, a big event that everyone can point to, or a little t trauma, just the way it was growing up and the way they internalized their environment. You don't have to have a dramatic story to have a body that is moving through life, trying to repress pain that hasn't been processed. The body is where the trigger comes up, and the body is where healing happens. If your addiction recovery hasn't introduced you to the wisdom of knowing how to honor your body, you're missing a really important piece. If you are in addiction recovery and something in this conversation is resonating, if you recognize that quiet feeling that something is still missing, I want you to know you're not failing at recovery. You may have just reached the edge of what the first beautiful layer of addiction recovery tools can do. And there is more available to you. I'll be sharing more about what that looks like in the videos ahead. Next up, what 12-step gets genuinely right and where it needs to go deeper. I'll see you there.